So in this first introductory video looking at the law of tort for the SQE, we're going to spend some time doing some introductory content, let's just say, and we're just going to ask this very basic question. What is tort? What is a tort? And the importance of this is, of course, to get an understanding of what we're actually studying before we start diving really deep into looking at the legal principles associated with tort. So I'm going to spend a good few lessons, just like I have done with all of the other modules, outlining some introductory concepts that aren't necessarily part of the specification itself, but I think are still necessary for you to have a foundational background. Now, if you come from a law background as an undergraduate and you've already studied the law of tort, you might think that this is a bit too simplistic, so feel free to move on to the next videos. But if you're someone who came from a non-law background, this might be quite important for you just to brush up and get some understanding of the area that you are now going to be studying. So essentially, this video, we are going to take an introduction to examine some of the basic concepts concerning the law of tort. We're going to begin specifically by asking a very, very important question. What tort even is in the first place? What even is tort? And it's quite interesting because tort is one of those sort of paradoxical areas of law. It's one of those areas that is probably one of the widest and most expansive areas of English law, and is one that is really not very well understood from a colloquial perspective. Not many people, if you mention the law of tort, are going to be able to identify for you what that is. But most people will have an idea of what a tort is in a general sense. Most people know what defamation sort of is from a broad perspective. Most people know what negligence entails in one way or another. Most people have seen a personal injury lawyer advert in their life and so have a basic idea of what that involves. But most people don't know that what this does is actually encompassing a whole area of law that we collectively call tort. Most people probably don't think that there is a connection between defamation and negligence, or from defamation and nuisance, or trespass and nuisance, or occupiers liability. These are all areas of law that are collectively given the title of tort, but are not necessarily well understood by everybody in society. And so one of the reasons for this might be because tort exists in a whole host of different forms. You have negligence cases, you have defamation cases, nuisance, trespass, product liability, occupiers liability, employers liability, all kinds of torts, tort of conversion, all kinds of different issues associated. And they all seem to be not very connected to each other when you just look from this very broad bird's eye view. But what then is the thing that unifies all these different areas? What does trespass have in common with defamation such that they are both considered to be torts, that they're both examples of torts and both examples of law that you will examine when you studied the law of tort? Well, fundamentally, simply put, a tort is a wrong for which civil liability is incurred. That's basically it. It's not a contractual wrong, because of course that involves the breach of contracts and contract law, but it is a wrong, which is the wrong of some kind of, or the breaching of some kind of protected characteristic, of some kind of protected interest. As Brennan describes it from the 2017 Tort Law Concentrate textbook, tort can be described as the area of civil law, making it very clear that we are not talking about the criminal law in this series, which provides a remedy for a party who has suffered the breach of a personal interest, of a protected interest. This is quite a broad understanding, and this is probably necessary for understanding torts in quite a broad way. What's fundamental is what counts as the protected interest in this example. Well, that all depends on the tort that we're talking about. In fact, the thing that delineates all the different torts is the protected interest, by and large, that you are identifying in that tort. So, for example, the tort of defamation will protect an individual's reputation. It's about reputational harm. It protects an individual against reputational harm and the damage that is caused by such harm. If you go around spreading lies publicly about a person, and that causes that person to lose some kind of to lose something, maybe they lose their job, or maybe they don't get a job because of it, then you have caused harm to that person, especially if that thing is, and actually required, if that thing is not true. If you say things that aren't true about somebody, you're damaging their reputation. Personal safety is protected mainly by the tort of negligence. If you are, let's say, in a position where you have some kind of duty of care, and you breach that duty of care and cause damage or harm or injury to a person, then you have basically breached a protected interest there. And the law of tort, the law of negligence, is supposed to sort of step in and provide remedy for that, for the breach of that particular interest. If you are somebody who is bringing a nuisance claim, well, nuisance protects a person's ordinary use of land or of property, only of land and property. So if you are somebody who owns land, who owns property, and you want to just use that for ordinary purposes, and somebody is interfering with that right, maybe they have, they're playing music too loud, or maybe they've got a floodlight that is causing quite a lot of light to go onto the back of your garden or something like that, and it's interfering with your ordinary use of land, then that can constitute a nuisance. So fundamentally then, the delineation that we're talking about here is between each of the different protected characteristics. The next lesson is going to spend a little bit of time talking about remedies, because we've focused in this lesson on the sort of first half of the spectrum, if you will, of the coin, the first side of the coin, looking at what is the protected characteristic, what is a tort anyway. But the second part is going to be talking about, well, when we identify a tort, or maybe even when we identify a claim that is valid, what then is the remedy for dealing with those situations? What is the remedy that you can associate with tort? What about the principle of compensation, the purpose of tort, the intention of having this type of legal system? That is all going to be subject of the next lesson.